All right, looks like history ended again for Hungary. Fidesz is out, Orban is out, and moderate technocracy is back in. This is Whispers of a Dark Future in the year of Elon Musk, and hey, maybe things aren't gonna be bad forever. All right, Piper, set the stage for what's going on in Hungary.
Yeah, so in their recent elections, it appears as if the opposition Tisza party has won the majority of parliamentary seats, ousting Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who's ruled the country for 16 years. And Orban is sort of the right wing populist extraordinaire of Europe. He's been a big thorn in the side of the EU. His regime has been very sort of autocratic, basically limiting any checks on Orban's executive authority, going after political opponents, scapegoating migrants and LGBT people. In fact, the term illiberal democracy was that academics now use to describe this sort of politics was basically comes from Orban himself, using it to describe his ideal form of politics. So this is a pretty major result in that now Hungary is at least expected not to be so much of a block on EU decision making. Since Orban was a right-wing populist, he would do things like, block the EU from supporting Ukraine or sanctioning Putin during the war because, as a right-wing populist close to Putin, he was essentially a representative of Putin's interests, at the geopolitical level. That's the sort of prompt for the show today. Interestingly, the reason that Orban and Fidesz lost was probably due to the fact that the EU has sanctioned Hungary for its illiberal posture and as a result is holding back funds from Hungary, EU funds from Hungary. And Hungary is in a pretty dire economic spot. So if the opposition leader, Magyar, manages to pull the country back in the liberal democratic direction with his promised anti-corruption reforms, then the money might start flowing back into Hungary again, and there could be some sense of economic recovery for Hungarians. But yeah, that's basically it.
Well, so Fareed Zakaria coined the term illiberal democracy in '97. But as far as I know, Orban was the first illiberal democratic leader to self-identify with the term and say that
Yeah.
was what he was precisely building in Hungary with the government of national
Right,
cooperation,
yeah.
where he had changed the constitution and cemented his power. Apparently, he didn't cement it as much as everyone thought because he got blasted out of the water by, moderate right technocrats who formed a party, then opened the party to the left side of moderate technocracy, and they came together and they defeated the fascism again. They defeated the illiberals, and now moderate technocracy is reasserting control. Hungary can for the third time, transition back to a liberal democracy until people
I think it
get
would
tired
be the
of that.
second because, like, before Fidesz got into power, that was like the post-Soviet.
Do you think this is the beginning of the end? Do you think Maloney is next? Because if you look on the screen, these results are pretty conclusive as to what's going on in Hungary. So do you think this is the beginning of the end for the illiberal democracies? Maloney hasn't actually been able to do much.
She basically capitulated to the EU, so.
Right, so she's like effectively neutralized. I mean, I guess she just get what? She's just gonna get voted out because of how weak she's been?
Probably.
Wow. And then maybe Russia? No, that's
I mean, this is not the fact is that right-wing populism and liberal democracy and all these other places depends on domestic developments, right? So just this is not gonna do much to seriously weaken it or push it back in those other countries. It is a significant defeat for it in Hungary, though. The problem is just that like the reason that populism has had so much success in the last 20 years is because of the intensification of culture war and because of the sort of elitist nature of liberal democracy, which, has in recent years come along with widening economic inequality, right? So that creates, basically, economic inequality combined with a sort of a backlash against struggles for the recognition and the rights of minority groups, as well as the fact that the sort of expert guided procedural consensus based institutions of the liberal democratic political order exclude most of the population from making the most important political decisions. That, of course, is a breeding ground for right-wing populism, when people just say, okay, well, the way that we're going to deal with these phenomena is we're going to capture democracy for the native common folk and their traditions, right? So, as long as liberal democracy continues to exist in an era of intensified cultural wars, intensified inequality, which it has no mechanisms to ameliorate, the populist thing is just going to keep going, until there's another form of politics which can act as an alternative to both elitist liberal democracy and right-wing populism. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, don't know what else to say that we already haven't said about populism. It looks like your choices when it comes to voting is either an ethnocracy where minorities are vaporized, or two parties debating which tax bracket should get the most cuts to their tax. So it's either McDonald's or a rotten cheeseburger is basically your options. So if you want a healthy, good, healthy, satisfying life, it ain't going to be through voting. So I guess, I can't wait for liberals to be like, well, the right populism stuff, that was a speed bump that got in the way of our individual. Now, now we're back.
Aren't they already saying that?
Yeah, there's a lot of them that are already really hyping this up. It's like, oh, this is the beginning of the end. The academics are more cool-headed. I think Fukuyama and Kasmad have just been like, yeah, this is cool, but we should probably not get our hopes up too soon about all this. So
yeah,
but I think there's a natural transition here. We're going to talk about another subject, which is there is a debate going on in the U.S. about what to do with the burgeoning illiberal democracy in the U.S. and what to do about change in Piper's pocket, which she won't stop playing with. How we're gonna get SWAT team down there. Okay, so the Democratic Party is trying to figure out how to win back the voters since they failed at prosecuting and getting rid of Trump and actually doing their job. They're now trying to figure out what's the best electoral policy to get people to the polls to vote him out. I'm sure they're going to be very energized by the Orban loss. And among this debate about what to do to get people back, there was a conversation about what to do with Hasan. So, if you don't know, Hasan is a political streamer. Yes, the two worst things coming together, politics and streaming. It's even more terrible than you think.
Political streamers are like honestly, it's like the worst thing to ever exist ever. It's like Satan himself was like, what can I do to make the worst thing to ever exist?
Right. Anyway, so just to summarize Hasan is a Marxist-Leninist, very pro-Marxism-Leninism and stuff like that. But the way he'll present himself in most of his streams and on clips is as just this epic progressive who wants healthcare for people. Just this widow guy who wants your healthcare, wants to give you good old healthcare. But who has said he does an ML podcast. He's been on ML podcasts. He's told MLs, yeah, I'm just trying to trick liberals into doing, at first we're going to do transitory social democracy, and then we're going to do Marxism-Leninism. So he's got this very funky idea of how to do ML stuff. He simps for the China regime. He simps for the Cuba regime, things like that. And so there is a debate in liberal circles as to whether or not to accept Hasan as part of like a coalition to topple right populism. The debate is odd because any liberal with like 2 cents will recognize not to allow Hasan in because Hasan represents an illiberal force, and coalitioning with illiberals to get rid of other illiberals sounds like, I don't know, poisoning yourself to try to get poison you've already put in your body out of your body. Like if you redouble too high, like you're kind of hoping, well, the Black Widow bit me, so the Black Widow poison is currently ravaging my body. So I'll find a King Cobra, have it bite me, so that the King Cobra venom and the Black Widow venom will fight each other, like in Freddy versus Jason, and hopefully they'll kill each other, and I'll come out on top. So, and then and there are liberals who don't really understand that Hasan actually is an illiberal force, and they're saying, you guys are all silly. We need Hasan. Hasan can mobilize the guys, the young guy population who's lonely. We lost young men. He can get us the young men for the vote. If Being was a liberal, Being would be firmly on the side that's saying, no, you should not be siding with Hasan. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. Thankfully, Being is not a liberal, so Being gets to sit on the bleachers and watch this disaster unfold, with some popcorn. So that's been a fun debate. There have been a number of liberal journalist outlets who've wrote hit pieces on Hasan, bringing up the statement where he said America deserved 9/11, all sorts of stuff like that. But the real meaty part of all those hit pieces is saying, look, Hasan is illiberal. He supports ML stuff. And if we're going to save liberal democracy, it doesn't really make sense to have someone part of our coalition who doesn't want to save liberal democracy, which is just like simple logic that I can't believe this is a debate in liberalism. And more to the point, I think precisely even bringing up Hasan, I don't really want to talk about Hasan here. What I really want to talk about is like liberalism, especially in the US, his inability to like do the liberal thing, which is when your social democracy is out the window and is decaying and dying, you're supposed to lead an armed revolt to restore it. This is something that classic social contractual theorists like John Locke, who's considered the more moderate between him and Rousseau. I mean, John Locke basically said if the socially contracted society you create, if the state in charge of maintaining that violates those rights every day, then the people should rise up and destroy that state and create a new state. This is in liberal theory. However, when far leftists, when socialists say, hey, we should violently oppose this illiberal regimes, and liberals go, nuh-uh, we need to vote him out. It's kind of funny because I'll see liberals on Twitter be like, you all want this silly revolution, or you want all this silly violence to get rid of an illiberal regime, but you guys don't know how politics works. Of course, Being has to ask, is it that they don't know how politics works, or you don't know? Because it's not just socialists who are supposed to be violently stopping this regime. It's your job as well to be taking what's left of the rule of law and weaponizing it against illiberalism. That's been you guys' job for centuries. And the fact that you think that it's only socialists who are capable of doing this is very sad and pathetic. So that's the extent of what I had to say. Now, of course, I'm not advocating for violence. Violence is bad, MK. Don't do violence. Instead, you should send a strongly worded letter to your local representative saying, I don't like it when you do this thing, smiley face. And then, if you send enough letters, the U.S. state will go, we're sorry we did that to you, and then they'll give you a big head pat and they'll be nicer to you. That's how reality works. Anyways, Piper, what's your take on all this?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's sort of comical, not sort of comical, really comical, that people on the liberal side of things in the United States, basically will wag their finger at you for not voting in the 2024 election, or they did the same thing in the 2020 election, or even the 2016 election when Trump won the first time. Like, there's this constant appeal, okay, you need to vote for the Democrats to stop the big bad of Trump. But then it's like, okay, but the Democrats had the White House, right, for 4 years, and they did nothing to do what they were in their legal rights to do, which is disbar Trump from running again because of his failed attempt to subvert the 2024 or the 2020 election. And so if the Democrats can't even do that in order to stop Trump from getting into office, why is it that I am constantly expected to keep voting for Democrats in order to keep Trump out of office or keep something bad out of office? Why is it that I need to put my faith in the Democratic Party as the wall separating the United States from barbarism? Like, why should I constantly maintain that faith when clearly there's no evidence that that's the way that actually works, right? I mean, also put aside the fact that anarchists not voting is not why Donald Trump won the 2024 election or whatever. But it's just, I think during his second term, the people that have been doing the most to actually limit what Trump is able to do is his conservative stacked Supreme Court, not the Democratic Party. And so it's just, it just stretches credulity rather beyond belief for me when people keep just saying, oh, just vote for the Democrats, vote for the Democrats, vote for the Democrats, and that will stop it. I mean, clearly that's not working.
That's interesting, right? So Jim and Bob strangle each other to death, and Bob is murdered. And they do an autopsy. They say, who could have saved Bob? And they say, Twinkle Twommy down the street, 5,000 blocks away. It's his fault that old Bobby was strangled to death because he could have intervened. He could have ran the 500 miles within 5 minutes to save his life, but he didn't. That's our autopsy report as to who killed Bob. Not the other guy. It was Twinkle Twommy down the street. That's whose fault it is. That's basically what liberals are saying when they say, how did our system die? It was the 5K, 10K maybe, extreme leftists in the whole of the U.S. spread out all across the U.S. It was all their fault. Our system is dying. Look, we had the military, we had the police, we had the world order, but it was 10,000 people spread across the third largest nation state on the earth. It was all their fault that died, okay? We just had the courts. We just had the military. We couldn't do anything about it. It was all your random people's fault, Could it have been the police captain sitting across from Bobby, sipping his tea, watching Bobby get strangled? Could he have done it? No. It was Twinkle Twommy 5,000 blocks away. He should have stopped it. Liberals have got to stop blaming random extremists for their system dying. It is your system. You got to take responsibility because there are not enough that what flipped that last election was not Danny the Trotskyite from 5 states over. You know what I mean? It was not the one Pol Potist in Missouri who really flipped that last election. It was hundreds of thousands of people, particularly in Minnesota, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, Arizona, in these places, in these swing states. Most of these people are your run-of-the-mill voters, consumers. And a lot of them, they sat out that election because they were told by the Democratic Party Kamala was going to win. Kamala had in the bag. And so a lot of people said, well, if she's just going to win, who cares? Why am I voting? This is just like in 2016. Now, again, yes, Hillary won the popular vote. But if you pay more attention, had she riled up more people in specifically those swing states, precisely because she did not rile up people in specific states, is why she lost 2016. And same thing with Kamala. Because Kamala could not rile up the base and get them excited in like 4 or 5 states, because yes, popular vote generally doesn't matter nationally, but the popular vote in those 5 states, those do matter. And if you can't rile up those people who, again, do not have a radical bone in their body, who are not even who have no idea what dialectical materialism is. They have no idea what Marxism-Leninism is. They have no idea what anarchism is. They're going to Walmart on Tuesdays and they're going to McDonald's on Fridays. If you can't rile those people up, that's your fault. That's all I'm going to keep saying. Now, what can you promise? Not much. Considering the system is dying, you really can't promise much. But I will say this, you could still lie. And I think that's what's funny, is you're not even lying. The Democratic Party is pitched. They don't even lie anymore. They don't even try to pitch the optional healthcare thing anymore, which, by the way, the Biden administration promised optional universal government healthcare. And immediately upon victory, the administration said nothing about that once they got into power. So that was fun. So yeah, your strategy for winning, I don't know what it is. It's not my problem, really, to figure it out for you. I will give you one suggestion, though. For the love of God, do not get your nominee to do a fucking rally with Liz Cheney. That's my only advice to you. That's all I'm going to say, because when you do that, you're going to just alienate moderate liberals who are going to look at that and they're going to go, well, if you're making all these concessions, if you're just going to do the same thing as before but less, there's reaching across the aisle, and then there's just, I'm the whole aisle. And then it just makes it feel like, well, what's the point of voting in the whole aisle? If there's not some, because the premise was there was some conflict. There's some allowance of conflict that led to reaching across the aisle. But the Kamala fucking campaign made it seem like there was going to be none of that. There wasn't even going to be a conversation. It was just going to be, we're not going to pass anything, or if we do, it'll be very lame stuff, because we're going to get into power, and half the cabinet's going to be Republican, half the cabinet's going to be Democrat, and there's not going to be a need to build the conflictual coalition. So, anyways, anything else happened in the news?
Besides the fact that Trump is saying he's going to seize the Strait of Hormuz. Well, he's not going to. He's basically got CENTCOM to say, like, oh, well, we're going to blockade the Strait of Hormuz also, so that, we'll take it out of we'll basically take that card out of the Iranians' hands. Of course, that's just going to lead to more market shocks, but,
Yeah. Well, if they want to stop Iran, they should get JD Vance to go over there, because every time JD Vance goes and visits somebody, they lose or die. The last Pope died. JD Vance goes and visits Orban, they lose.
Vance to go. He just this whole, like, we're gonna seize the Strait of, or we're gonna blockade the Strait of Hormuz, right? That started after JD Vance came back empty-handed from the negotiating table with Iran that was being mediated by Pakistan. So
right, he killed
that already happened.
Yeah, JD Vance killed the deal. He's the omen of bad luck.
Yeah, JD Vance walks into like a Nebraska town, and because of that, their their corn harvest or whatever is like terrible that year.
JD Vance walks. No. JD Vance walks in Nebraska. He's like, I support the Republican governor of Nebraska. Come election time, the Democrat nominee wins. Nebraska goes blue for no reason. It's just like,
look, this is the actual strategy that cent libs need to employ. Like, just have JD Vance endorse like all of these populists, and then they'll all fail, and then we'll be back, as they say.
I love that Trump promised Orban, if Orban won, a bunch of business and money for Hungary. So that's going well right now. So that was funny.
Yeah.
Anyways, history ended for the 5,000th time. Go eat your chicken nuggies, because it's business as usual, at least for Hungarians. So, Hungarians, you can eat chicken nuggies again. Yay! Hungarian chicken nuggies. Hey, when you eat the chicken nuggies, you won't be so hungry anymore. I bet you haven't heard that joke a billion times by every tourist who's ever walked into your country. All right. This is a short one. I don't really know what to say. Any last words?
The end of history in Steve.
The end of, so what? The book, like end of history book with Steve? How does that work?
No, Steve ends history.
Oh, Steve ends history. So Steve gets like the nuclear launch codes and just like fucking... Okay. A DVD copy of Into the Storm. 2 quarters that were in Piper's pocket. All right. Bye.
This is important. We're going to be putting up a scorecard, okay? An early vote scorecard, state by state.